Greetings, everyone. Today, we will continue on with our discussion on the wrath of the gods. We will be encountering the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Demeter was the daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and she was known as one of the first Olympian gods. After the war between the Olympians and the Titans, Demeter became an important goddess of agriculture. As a matter of fact, her name Demeter meant Earth Mother or Grain Mother. With Zeus, her brother, they had a daughter named Persephone, who was also called Kore, which means maiden. The people of ancient Greece prayed to Demeter for healthy crops and abundant harvests. People thought that it was Demeter who controlled the vegetation of the earth. So they believed that when the ground was fertile and the grains grew successfully, Demeter seemed like a kind goddess. But when the winter came, or there was drought, people thought she must be angry or upset. So people would constantly pray for Demeter to always be happy, and so that she would be kind to the earth. The temples of Demeter, wherein people would have different festivals, ceremonies, and rituals, are located in Eleusis, and this is near Athens. Every autumn, they would have festivals in honor of Demeter, and although these festivals are popular or known all over Greece, not a lot of people would know what goes on during the rituals. Anyone who wants to join these rituals were called initiates. Even today, these festivals are known or called Eleusinian mysteries, which is very befitting the name since nobody really knows what goes on in these festivals. But one thing is for certain, that these people, these followers of Demeter, believed that the crops, the blooms, are all dependent on the emotions of the goddess. And since she was so loved by the people, they could not find any justification as to why there was drought, there was winter, where the crops stopped growing. And some experts say that they made this myth to justify the months where there was scarcity of crops. Now let's begin the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Persephone was a product of two powerful gods, Demeter and Zeus. Demeter loved her daughter to the point where she didn't want to be apart from her. When Persephone grew up, her beauty caught the attention of Hades. Hades immediately fell in love. He knew right then that he wanted to marry her and nobody else. He went to Zeus and asked for his blessing to marry Persephone and make her the queen of the underworld. He said, "Brother, I am in love with your daughter Persephone. Let me have your consent to marry her. I will make her the queen of the kingdom in the underworld." Zeus was stuck between an internal conflict. On the one hand, he knew Hades was going to be a good husband for Persephone, as he was fair and powerful. On the other hand, he knew that Demeter would never want to part from her daughter, and that Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and fertility, had a strong influence on earth, and he feared the consequences. Zeus found a clever way to respond to this to avoid disappointing his brother and being blamed by Demeter. He said to Hades, "Brother, I cannot approve of a marriage between you and Persephone." Zeus was telling Hades and hoping that he would read between the lines that although he could not officially approve the marriage, he was not forbidding it either. Hades understood immediately what Zeus was implying and set out a plan to make Persephone his bride. One day, Persephone went out to pick wild flowers with her friends near Eleusis. It was a very peaceful and relaxing day that nobody expected something bad will happen. She was making a bouquet for her mother. and slowly she wandered away from her friends. In a quiet glen she spotted a beautiful narcissus, and she went to pick it up. The soonest that she did, she realized its roots were lodged deep, so she tugged harder. Suddenly, the ground where the narcissus bloomed opened up, and Hades snatched Persephone, bringing her immediately to the underworld. The poor maiden was not able to do anything except cry out to her mother. And up on Olympus, Demeter heard her daughter's terror-filled cries. She immediately went to the place where she heard her daughter's cries, only to find that Persephone was already gone. She roamed the earth for 9 days and 9 nights, until she met Hecate on the 10th day. Hecate was near the location where Persephone was abducted, and she told Demeter that she also heard her daughter's cries, but unfortunately she didn't see what happened. She did help her search for Persephone, and the two goddesses met Helios. Helios, the sun god, can see everything from his place up in the sky, and he felt pity for Demeter, so he told her that Hades had abducted Persephone and made her his bride. He tried to console Demeter by telling the goddess that Hades was a good match for her daughter. However, Demeter was not swayed. Demeter was so wrought in grief at what happened to her daughter that she wandered the earth in the guise of a mortal woman. The grains failed and the land started to become parched, but Demeter did not care about that anymore. Her grief made the beautiful goddess unrecognizable even. Demeter wandered back to Eleusis, where she met the four daughters of Helios, the king of Eleusis. They did not recognize a goddess for who she is, and they offered her a job as a nurse to their younger brother Demophoon. Demeter gladly accepted the offer by the princesses, and they went to the palace. When they arrived there, her golden hair had turned to gray, her skin was wrinkled and loose, and all her inner radiance was hidden beneath a dark robe. However, the queen, Metanira, felt a different aura towards the new nurse. She offered Demeter her best chair and asked one of the servants to bring her some sweet wine, but Demeter refused. Instead, the goddess requested to see her son. So Metanira just wondered who this person was, but she didn't take mind of it and brought Demeter to see her son. When Demeter first carried Demophoon in her arms, he smiled and gurgled at her. Queen Metanira was happy her son felt comfortable with the new nurse, and of course all the suspicions went out the window. Demeter felt happy watching over the young child, and eventually she decided on making him immortal. While the family was sleeping, Demeter secretly lathered the prince with ambrosia, and then placed him in the hearth to burn away his mortality. And the rituals worked. Demophoon soon grew healthy and fast. Queen Metanira became very suspicious now. One night, she decided to investigate what their nurse Demeter was doing to their son. And there she saw the ritual. She saw the nurse turning the baby in the fire like roasting a pig. Metanira screamed, and her screams interrupted Demeter, who threw the baby to the floor. And since Demophoon has already started the ritual, he never actually was harmed with that action. King Helius went to see why his wife was shouting, and when he entered, he saw the old nurse transform into a bright goddess right before his eyes. Instead of getting upset at them, Demeter knew that the king and queen were just acting out of their love for their son Demophoon. She forgave them and told the couple to build a temple in her name. There she taught the people of Eleusis how to perform ceremonies for her. Unfortunately for Demophoon, he wasn't able to become immortal, but he would still be honored since the goddess was his nurse. Once a temple was built, the goddess went to live there and avoided Olympus. Without anything to distract her anymore, no Demophoon, no work, she again began to grieve the disappearance of her daughter Persephone. While she continued to grieve, the crops stopped growing. Because of the lack of crops, every living thing on earth started to starve. They were starting to be desperate. Zeus was afraid of the repercussions and pleaded to Demeter, but she refused. She said she will not share her power if her daughter is far away in the underworld. With a heavy heart, Zeus sent Hermes to go and send Hades a message asking him to return Persephone. Hermes reached the underworld and delivered the message to Hades. Persephone, who came from crying because she missed her mother, cried out in joy when she heard the message. Hades knew that he had no choice but to obey Zeus and let Persephone go home to her mother. Hades, who now felt saddened by the message, pleaded to his wife to not think ill of him. He told her that she was the most powerful woman, since she is now a queen, and asked for mercy. "My beloved wife," he said, "remember that here you are the queen, the most powerful woman of all. As the queen of the underworld, you even have power over the living, because you have control over what happens to people when they die. Because of this, you have the power to be merciful, which is the greatest gift of all. Do not think ill of me or this kingdom when you are far away from here." Before letting her go, Hades offered Persephone 4 pomegranate seeds to eat. He did not tell Persephone, however, that whoever ate the food from the underworld would have to return to his kingdom someday and live there indefinitely. Persephone, who was really just excited to go back to her mother, did not really pay attention to that, or she did not know the consequences of her actions. She gladly received the pomegranate seeds and ate them before leaving with Hermes. When they arrived to Eleusis, Persephone and Demeter embraced each other in a joyful reunion of mother and daughter. Demeter asked Persephone if she ate anything. This was really odd for Persephone, who answered that she did eat 4 pomegranate seeds. Demeter, who knew the consequences, that which means that her daughter would have to go back to Hades and become his bride in the underworld, was afraid, and thus she went to Zeus to ask for advice. Zeus was happy with the reunion of mother and daughter, but he knew he was faced with a problem on Persephone eating the seeds. He offered a compromise: 1 month for every pomegranate seed instead of indefinitely living in the underworld. This was the rule of the universe, and Demeter, who understood the compromise, was appeased with Zeus's compromise, and she allowed Persephone to live with Hades for just 4 months. From that time on, Demeter and Persephone lived together for 8 months, and the world would bloom and flourish. For 4 months, she would stay with Hades in the underworld. These 4 months when Persephone was away made Demeter sad, and she would mourn the loss of her daughter's company, and that was when the earth would be as cold as ice until Persephone returned. When Persephone returns, the flowers and the crops then start to bloom, grow, and bear fruit, thus signifying the different seasons in the world. This ends the myth of Demeter and Persephone, and this is one of the myths where you can really see the wrath of the gods, when Demeter's power was enough to really cause starvation amongst the living things in earth. I hope you understood one of the myths on the wrath of the gods, and we will proceed with our next discussion on Dionysus and his followers.